Hey guys, my name is Neel and welcome to Neel Workshop Zone. So in this episode we are going to be talking about parameters and arguments. So in our previous episodes we talked about scopes and a lot more stuff regarding JavaScript. So if you haven't checked it out, I recommend checking out those episodes. But in this episode we are going to be talking about parameters or arguments. So without further ado, let's talk about them. So first of all, parameters and arguments are basically have the same use basically. Because both parameters and arguments, both of them are used to define the function or the value of the function that we write in the function code. So for example, if I write something like function x is a fruit, or let's write something like function fruit, and fruit is equals to apple. And if I ask you to print fruit, this isn't obviously how the code is written, but let us assume for this purpose this is we have written a function, we have defined the function, and we are calling out the function. So like I said, there isn't a difference between parameter and argument, but from the term of the from the terms of the program, from the JavaScript program, there is a difference between this, and this is what you can call as parameter, the value that is written inside of the function block. On the other hand, argument is basically the value that is being called out or being returned back when bringing back. So this is parameter, and when you print the function, the value that you get is what you can call as the argument, or the value that is brought back when you future call it in the program or the code is what you call as the argument. So most of the time we don't really use parameters, we mostly just use the word argument for the word. But yeah, that is the difference between parameter and argument. So now let's talk about the number of arguments that you can write in a function. So when you write a function and when you write the parameter and when you bring back the argument in some part of the code, you need to make sure that the argument brought back is equal to the number of parameters that we have defined in the function. So for example, if I write something like function car is equals to, not equals to, but if I write like Volvo, Ford and Hyundai, let us assume. And after writing this, imagine I asked them to return or print car plus height. So in this, if you can see properly, I know I haven't written properly, but if we call only two of the arguments from the car, in that case it will show an error, because if there are three arguments written in a function, you need to bring back three. You cannot bring more or less, because doing more or less will bring an error to the code. So you need to make sure that when you're writing a function and bring that arguments of the function to a part of the code so that you can print them or work on them, you need to make sure that the number of functions that you need to write are equal to the number of arguments that you will call. If not, you can write multiple functions and make sure that the amount of arguments called are equal to the number of functions specified in a single function block. So that is basically how you can write number of arguments and the rule for number of arguments. But let us assume that you don't know how many number of arguments that you will bring. So for example, let us assume that you're writing a function and you don't know what are the arguments that you will bring or what are the number of arguments, because you haven't specified what are the arguments. In that case, you can use an asterisk. So by writing an asterisk before a function, something like this, it will make the computer know that even you don't know the number of arguments that you will be writing. So by writing the future part, it will be much more helpful when you don't know the number of arguments that you will call. So that is really important. But let us assume another scenario where you are writing a function and you have written 3 to 4 parameters or arguments, and you want to write them in such a way so that it is specifically called when I ask for something else and it's not called out at random. So for example, let us assume we have apple and orange and the banana. And let us assume that this is a function x. So imagine that when you ask for, let us put an asterisk for example. Obviously this is inside function, we have to write more of like x is equals to this and function is bracket x. So now let us assume that you need to bring out a specific value of the parameter and you want to render it instead of just being random. So something like the red one or the red fruit is that and the yellow fruit dash. And imagine you have a scenario like this where you need to write them in specific order so that it displays in specific ways. So you need to make it in such a way that the parameter call is written for one specific printer and is not repeated or written in random order, because most of the time when you write a function like this, it is always randomized. So in that case, what you can do is you can use something known as the equals to sign, which we have talked about, but not in this type of example. So for example, now if I write something like v1 is equals to orange, v2 is equals to apple, and v3 is equals to banana, and if I write something like write v1 over here or call v1, and if I write something like that, then in that case the arguments called will be equal to the arguments that you want to write, and it won't be randomized. And for not making it randomized, you can use the equals to sign. So that is why you can use equal to signs as well. And on the default, let us also assume that you have written a function of a car, but you don't really write functions of car, but you ask it to bring in other functions. So for example, let us assume you define function car, but you didn't write a function specifying to print the car, but instead you write functions of something else. Sometimes the JavaScript will do it in such a way that it brings out the default parameter value. So for example, if you have other functions printed which are similar to those, then it will print those functions. But putting all of this aside, one other important thing is you can't really write a function without specifying the value of the function. So for example, if I write something like function and car, and don't write what car is supposed to mean and ask it to print it will show an error. But imagine for some reason, which makes no sense, but for some reason if you want to put in function as space or as blank and you want to use it in the future, in that case what you can do so that it prevents an error from happening is you can use the keyword pass, P-A-S-S. By using that keyword, what happens is that the function is excused for now so that you can use it in the future. So yeah, that is basically about arguments, parameters of JavaScript. And in the next episode we'll talk about arrays. So to not miss out, like, share and subscribe this video. Click the notification bell so you don't miss out any new videos. Hope you enjoyed the video and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.